Okay, so this morning's class is going to be focusing on our user training, looking at the types of things that a user might do. So we're starting off here with our login page for the website. This would be after an employee has entered the web address for your department. Whether you're using an individualized web address or you're using our single login server, that email address, that website should have been provided to you. If for any reason you don't have your web address, let us know. If you're hosted, we can get you the address. If your department is hosting your system, then you would have to get your web address from your own IT people. But this is what our login screen will look like, something along these lines here. And we would have our users go ahead and enter their username and password. Your username is whatever you created for them. So one of our setup classes covered setting up users. There was a number of different options you could have used for a username. Employee ID number. Some departments use first initial last name. Some departments use email address. All those types of things are available. So whatever your department chose for your username, you would place here. Your password, if it's the first time you're logging in, then your default password would be your first initial and the first 8 characters of your last name. Keep in mind that would be respecting capitals the way they would be in your name. In other words, the first letter of my first name would be capital. The first letter of my last name would be capital. If I had any additional capitals in my name, those would be capitalized. Any symbols that might be used in your name would be there as well. So if I had a hyphenated last name, that hyphen would be included. If my last name was Smith Jr., I would be Smith, Smith space Jr. would all be in my default password. So just remember that those items are going to be included in there since the system created that password based on your last name in the program. Okay, so we're going to log in, and as a user, the first time that you log in, the system would bring you immediately to this page here, requiring you to change your password. Okay, now we certainly don't want you to just leave your password as whatever the default is, because obviously that's very easy to figure out. So we are going to ask you right away to change your password. Now this is a very basic change password screen. You're going to enter your current password once, whatever it is right now. And then you're going to enter your new password twice. Now there's a note up here about enforced rules. For enforced rules, use a minimum of 8 characters, at least 1 uppercase letter, 1 lowercase letter, 1 digit, and 1 special character. That is a department-by-department decision if you are going to turn those rules on. So those rules may not apply to your department. That would be depend on whether or not you turn those rules on in your company profile. Okay, once I enter my current password once and my new password twice, and I can hit submit. And as long as it accepts my password, I will get a notice right around here that says your password has been saved. It will be in red, and it will appear right in this area here. I mention that because some people do miss that notice, that notification. So, and I advise everyone to look there, and if you're training people, to stress that looking right here for the confirmation that your password has been saved. Okay. The system will not require you to change your password every month or 2 months or anything like that. So once you set your password, that's what it will what it will remain unless you decide to go into the employee menu. And down here in settings, you can go to the change password screen, and you can change it if you decide that you would like to. Okay, so that's changing your password. We're just going to cover a couple of other items here under settings. Next one I want to talk about is set home page. And this is simply a drop-down that lets me choose my home page. What's the first page that loads up whenever I log into the web? So as a user, there would be much less available to me here. And I can just look through and pick whatever I like. Some people like to use the daily schedule as their first page. Some people like to use a monthly calendar. Some people like to go right to pages where they can schedule their time off or schedule their overtime. Whatever works for the employee is fine. They can set that as their home page by simply selecting it and hitting save. And that'll say that your save is successful. And it will also remember that item, so next time you log in, you'll go directly to that page. Okay, the last item that you may give, or that users may have access to under settings, would be personnel information. And this screen allows me to go in and update my contact information. Okay, so this may be helpful if your department is using maybe a replacement policy to generate a call list. So this would let me, as the user, update my phone numbers. Or even if I just want to go ahead and keep my address and emergency contact current, I can go in, I can edit any of these fields here. All the fields labeled in red are required. So in order for me to be able to save any changes I make here, in this scenario, I would have to fill out my address as well. And then you can just go ahead and save that at the bottom, and that will update your personnel information throughout the system. I should mention that this class is going to be based on most common screens used, or best practices, really the things that are kind of part of the initial basic user setup. Individual departments, if they've gone in and modified privileges through security, you may see additional items or you may see less items based on that. So some departments maybe don't allow you to set your or edit your personnel information here. And in that case, you just wouldn't see that item in your menu. Okay, so those are just 3 little basic setting items to cover first. Does anybody have any questions on any of those? Changing password, setting home page, or personnel information? Okay. All right, so the next set of items I want to show you are the different things found under View Schedule. This is where we have all of our different schedule views. And I'm going to start off with our daily schedule. Okay, our daily schedule consists of up to 6 blocks per page, with each block representing a different shift in your department. In each block, you'll see a list of names of people that are scheduled to be working that day, along with their title. To the left of that, you'll see an area for job. Okay, so any job assignment that has been assigned to that person will show there. And over on the right, we have an area for details, and this could show a number of different things. It could be additional items that are assigned to that person, maybe cars, AEDs, weapons, other things of that nature. It could also be a place where I could add comments on the schedule to show next to someone's name. And if the person was on time off or on overtime that day, there would be an item in the details section that indicates what type of time off or what was the reason for the overtime. And finally, if somebody had their start and end times adjusted from whatever the normal shift hours are, those hours would show there as well. Okay, over to the right here, we have arrows that will allow us to go to the next page. If this view has multiple pages, we can click the arrow here to go to the next page. We can use this arrow to go back. Home will always bring you back to the first page of that dashboard. Now, it is possible to have multiple dashboards. So up here in this drop-down, we could see different dashboards. Maybe your dashboards were set up to represent different departments or subdivisions within your department. So maybe you have a patrol. Maybe this is the whole department, and maybe this is just patrol, or maybe you have one for investigations. Maybe you have one for communications. Depending on how big your department is, that may dictate how many of those were set up. By default, there's going to be one set as your home page, so that's the one that will show up first, again, by default. But you can use the drop-down here to choose to look at different views. And then over here, we have the date that we're currently viewing, which by default would be today's date. And we have some arrows to change the date. We have the single arrows to go ahead a day or back a day. Double arrows will let us go ahead 1 week or back 1 week. Today will always bring you back to the current day's date. And if I click this calendar button, I will get a calendar that will let me choose the day that I want to view, and we'll go right to the schedule for that day. Okay, so that's our daily schedule. It's available on the web. Some of our other views that we have under View Schedule, there's a weekly schedule. Now, our weekly schedule is set up by group. So whatever group I'm a part of, that's the group that's going to show up first. And I'm going to see everybody who's part of that group and their schedule for the week, when they're working, when they're off, and I'll be able to see what shift they're working when they are working. This will also start to fill out with time off entries as well as they begin being entered into the system. Again, by default, we're going to load to the group that you're a part of, but I can choose any group in our system from the drop-down here. And that will allow me to see the schedule for that group. And the week that we're viewing is whatever week contains this date right here. So if I want to look at next week, I just open up my calendar, I pick any day next week, and that will show me the schedule for that week. Okay. Our monthly schedule works pretty much the same way. So it's set up by group, and we see all the people who are part of that group here. And over here, we see when they're working and when they're off. Now, we have a little bit less room here, so we use a single letter abbreviation for the shift that that person is working. And again, this will populate with time off as well. And just like before, I can choose other groups to look at. And the month that we're viewing is whatever month contains this date here. So again, if I want to look at December, I just pick any day in December, and that will give me the schedule for that group for December. Okay, so those views, daily schedule, weekly schedule, and monthly schedule, they're going to show us multiple people at once. So whether it be everybody that's working that day or everybody who is part of a group. Our calendar views, they're going to show us just one person at a time. So if I go to the monthly calendar, that's going to bring up my calendar for the month. And I can see when I'm scheduled to work, when I'm off. My time off and my overtime will start to populate on here as well. And up here, I can see the month that we're currently viewing. I have the arrows here that will let me go ahead a month or back a month. This button will bring me to the current month. And this drop down will let me choose a month and view that calendar. Okay, finally, the yearly calendar, again, is going to bring up my calendar for the current year. And will show me when I'm scheduled to work, when I'm off. And again, my time off and my overtime is all going to start to show in here. And on the yearly calendar and the monthly calendar, it's all color-coded using this scheme right here. Okay, so those are the 5 different schedule views that an employee may have access to and may be able to view when they go onto the web. Does anybody have any pages about or any questions about those? Either what they do or how to use them, what they show, anything along those lines? Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to the main actions that an employee might take. You know, view schedule, I can go in there, I can view my schedule, but when I want to do things, those are mostly going to be found under the employee menu and in the actions section here. Okay. Now, for training purposes, we're logged in as an admin, so we see everything that's available here. But again, we're going to focus on the 3 main items that a user or that users are most commonly given access to. The first one we're going to look at is scheduling time off. So when an employee wants to put in for time off, they're going to go under employee and actions, and they're going to go to schedule time off. And that's going to bring us to this screen here. And this will let us fill out a form for the time that we want to take off. So by default, my name will be up here at the top. And I want to continue down the list here, work from top to bottom, and fill out the items, especially the ones labeled in red, which are required items. First thing we have is our date or our date range. So if I want to put in for a single day off, then I can just set these dates to be the same, and that'll put me off for one day. Or I can put in for a date range. Maybe I want to put in for a couple of days off using the same type of time. This will allow me to set a date range. If you are setting a date range, you might want to keep in mind that the system knows when you're working and when you're not. And it will ignore any regular days off that are found in the date range that you might submit. So, for example, if I'm off on Saturday and Sunday, but I want to take Friday and Monday off for a long weekend, as long as I'm using the same type of time, I can set a date range of Friday through Monday, and the system will automatically ignore Saturday and Sunday and only put me on time off for Friday and Monday. Okay, once I have my date set, the next item here is shifts. Now, for most people in most departments, you can just leave this shift drop-down as all shifts. But this drop-down will populate with whatever shifts you are working during this date range. So sometimes if maybe you have 2 shifts in a day and you only want to take one off, it may be useful to select the specific shift from that drop-down. I see that most commonly with maybe fire departments where they might have like they might work 24 hours, but it might be divided into a day shift and a night shift. I also sometimes see it with investigators if they maybe have an on-call shift that's been entered into the system and they want to take the day off, but they don't want to be charged for the on-call shift as well, then in that case, they may want to open this up and choose just their regular shift and not the on-call shift. Okay, the next item is part of day. If I'm taking the whole day off, then I would leave this as entire day. But I do have the option for putting in for a partial day. Maybe I just want to take a couple of hours at the beginning of my shift off or at the end of my shift. In that case, I would use first or second. When I choose these items, you'll get additional fields where you can enter the start and end time of your time off. Obviously, we don't need that when we're taking the entire day because we know that it's going to be your full shift. But in this case, we need to know exactly how many hours are you going to take if it's not going to be the full day. First and second, or entries with first and second can be entered on the same day. Perhaps in a scenario where maybe I want to take the whole day off, but I want to split it between 2 different types of time off. I can put in an entry for the first part of day for comp time and maybe second part of day for vacation. Okay, so that's what first part of day, or so that's what part of day does. The next item here is reason, and that's where I choose what type of time off do I want to take. So I have a list here, I pick from that. That list may vary depending on your department, of course, and what types of time off you use. There's a note here, whenever you are doing entire day, a reminder that unpaid lunch will be deducted. Now, that's only for people who have an unpaid lunch entered for them in the system. So if there's anybody in your department who maybe works 8 hours but has or maybe works 8.5 hours but has a half-hour unpaid lunch, that can be entered into the system, so that way we know to not charge them for that time, so we don't charge them too much time out of their bank. If this doesn't apply to you, it's fine. You can just ignore it. It's just a reminder for people that do have an unpaid lunch. Next is status. As a user, my only option would be request. I would only be able to submit this as a request. And then down here, there's a field for comments. This is an optional field. That's why it's not labeled in red. You don't have to put anything in there, but if you wanted to, you could place comments in there. It's a free entry text field, maybe a note about why you are taking that time off. Okay, once you've entered those pieces of information, I can come down to the bottom here. We have an item that says email notification. By default, that is going to be set as send to default. So if you have set up your email defaults for your groups, the system will automatically send an email to those people in the background when you submit this request. So then I just go ahead and I hit save. Okay, what we're seeing right here is a warning that the employee does not have enough time in their bank. From this point, we have two options. We can say, no, I don't want to continue. Maybe I go back and I change the type of time that I'm using or adjust how many hours I'm requesting off. But there is the option to say, yes, I want to continue. You know, maybe there is a reason why you would still request this time off, even though there's no time in the bank. Maybe you're putting in for time off in the future and you haven't earned that time yet, but you will earn it between now and then. Or maybe it's a type of time that you don't maintain a bank for. You know, maybe it's something like holiday time or bereavement time, where we don't actually put time into a bank for you. You just use it as needed. So either way, you make your decision here. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and click yes, so we can continue with our example. And you'll get a message here that your request has been saved. Okay. We're going to go ahead and hit OK on that. And this will start to populate on our different schedule views. So if we go back to view schedule and we look on the daily schedule, for example, actually I think it's on the second page here. There we go. So the employee's name is now highlighted in whatever color was set for requested vacation time. In our case here, it's blue. And you see the VAC next to their name in the details section. There's also a question mark there, which indicates that it's requested. It has not yet been approved. Okay. I can also begin to see this in things like my weekly schedule. Again, VAC, question mark for requested, and highlighted in the color that was chosen for your department. Monthly calendar as well. I'm sorry, monthly schedule, I mean. We have a little bit less room here, so we use a single letter abbreviation for that, V. and then our calendar views. VAC for vacation, the question mark, and the color according to this key down here. Same thing for a yearly calendar. Okay. So that's how you would enter a time off request as a user. Does anybody have any questions about that, about how to request time off? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to our next item. Again, back under the employee menu and under actions. Next one I'm going to show you is called schedule overtime. So this allows an employee to put in an overtime slip for overtime that they may have worked. Now, in our system, if overtime has been entered already by a supervisor, if it's been something that's been maybe planned out in the future, and the supervisor has already put the overtime into the system, a user doesn't need to go in and enter it a second time. It's already in there. It's already ready to be processed by payroll. This is more commonly used for things that maybe we don't know in advance or we can't schedule in advance. So maybe things like a late call at the end of my shift, or I had to stay and work on some reports, something that we didn't know in advance. Or maybe I use this slip to indicate that I went to court on my day off and indicate how I want to be paid for it. Some departments also use this to enter for holiday pay. If I work a holiday and maybe I have a choice between cash or comp, I can submit a slip saying that I worked on that day and here's how I want to be paid for it. So those are the most common scenarios that this screen would be used. And filling it out is going to be very similar to how we fill out a time off slip. We got our name already set at the top here. And we're going to work our way down, paying attention to the items labeled in red. So let's say I had to stay late on my shift yesterday. So I go in, I choose yesterday's date. I choose the shift that I was working. Whatever that might be, I choose from the drop down here. Okay, so I'm going to say I stayed late on my administrative shift. And then reason, there'll be a number of reasons available here. These, of course, will vary department to department because these are created by your project team for your department. So let's say it was clerical work. Now for pay type, I can choose from the available pay types using this drop-down. Those pay types may vary depending on the reason that you select here, which is why it's important to work from the top down because you want to choose your reason first. Otherwise, if I choose my pay type and then I choose my reason, it's going to reset my pay type based on the available options. Okay, so I'm going to say clerical work. I'm going to take straight time cash. And then start and end time, I'm going to enter the hours for my overtime. Now, these are going to default to the hours of the shift that I selected here. But I can change them. My overtime wasn't for those hours. My overtime actually started at 17 when my shift ended, and maybe it went to 1800. Okay. As it says down here, leave blank for auto-calculate. The system will automatically figure out the number of hours based on the difference between the start and end time. So you can leave that alone. That will recalculate itself. And again, as a user, my only option is to submit this as a request. I would normally not have the ability to approve or deny my own overtime. Now again, there's a space down here for comments. It's a optional field, free entry, text. I can write whatever I like in there. Some departments might use this for a description of what the person was doing during their overtime, or a call number or a case number that might be associated with that overtime. And again, down at the bottom, we have our email notification, and this will automatically be set as send to default. So again, if you leave that the way it is, it will send email notification to whoever was set up as the default recipients for your group. And once I'm done, I go down here and I click Save. And that'll let us know that our request has been saved. And again, to kind of give you a glimpse here of how this stuff starts to populate on our schedule, if we look at yesterday's schedule, and we go to the admin shift, you'll see the person's original schedule and then an hour of overtime, the code for that overtime, the hours, the question mark indicating that it's requested, and it's being highlighted in whatever color was set by your department for overtime. And I can start to see it on my calendar views as well. Okay, my regular shift and then my overtime information. Question mark and the color blue for requested, and my yearly calendar as well. Okay, so that's how a user can submit a request for overtime. Does anybody have any questions about that, about how that screen works, or what scenarios you might use it for? Okay, the final action that we'll take a look at today for a user will be to request a switch. So again, under Employees and under the Actions menu, we have an item here called Request Switch. And this is something that might be used by departments that allow employees to switch with one another. Allows me to say, I'm going to work for you today, you work for me tomorrow. So the top section is what we call a switch, which is like I just said, you're going to work for me today, I'm going to work for you tomorrow. We know both parts of the switch up front. The bottom part is called a substitution, and that's more of an open-ended switch. That says, you're going to work for me today, and I will pay you back sometime down the road. Okay. So if your department allows switches to take place, then this is where you can request them. There is a third type of switch that some departments use. It's called a reciprocate. That's a switch that's an official schedule change and has ramifications sometimes for things like shift differential or hours worked or things of that nature. At this point, a reciprocation cannot be requested. So if your department is using those, you would have to let your supervisor know outside of our system. But if your department uses these non-official schedule change switches, these schedule changes, or these shifts that are more, these switches that are more of a note on the shift than it is an actual change to the schedule, you can request them from here. So if you're doing a switch, if you know who's going to work for you and what days you're going to cover for each other, you're going to put, my name will be here. I'll choose the date that I'm scheduled to work and the shift that I'm working. When I hit update, will show here. Then I pick the person that I'm going to switch with. I choose the date that they're working, and I hit update here. And if they're scheduled to work that day, that will show right there. Okay, so if I want to go ahead and submit this request, I hit the request button here. Now, the system will check for a couple of things. One of the things it checked for is that the from employee, this person here, is already working on this day and shift, so we can't process that switch. So it will check for things like that. It will also check to make sure that both employees have at least one matching validation skill set. So if I was, if you're using validation and I'm patrol and the other person is dispatch, and we don't have a skill set in common, a skill in common, we cannot process that switch with each other. I'll give it one more shot here. Yeah, so those employees don't have a matching skill. So if all the checks are passed, the system will then say that your switch request has been saved. And it's going to automatically send out an email to both people who are part of the switch to make sure they're both aware of it. And it's also going to send an email to both of those people's supervisors so that way someone can go in and approve that switch request. So that's a switch. Down here is a substitution, and again, this is more open-ended. So this says, I am scheduled to work on Friday, and here's the shift that I'm working, and someone's going to work for me. And I can enter whether it's going to be the whole shift or just part of the shift by using the start and end times. Now, we don't know when I'm going to cover for Dan. I'm going to take care of that later on down the road. But this is just saying that Dan is going to cover for me on this day and this shift. So then I go ahead and I submit request. And again, it's still checking those items there to see if the person's already working. But you'll get a notification that says that the substitution has been saved, the request has been saved. And again, both employees will get the email and the supervisors will get the email as well, so that way they can go in and approve it. Okay, so that's how you can use the request switch screen to submit a request for a switch or a substitution. Does anybody have any questions on that screen? Okay. All right, so then I'm going to go ahead and cover our last item for today, which will be reports. There's a couple of reports that are usually given to users that can be accessed through the web portal. And they're found in two places. First of all, under Employee, down at the bottom here, we have Reports. So we have several reports here. First one is an Administrative Days Log. You're going to find that all the reports that we go to from within the Employee menu, they are kind of just quick reports. They just bring up the information for that employee for the current year. There's not a lot of setup or the ability to set parameters for these reports. They just automatically bring up the information for the current, the person who's logged in for the current year. So Administrative Days Log shows any time that's been added to or subtracted from my bank at an administrative level. So if we went in and somebody added time, or if the automatic allotments were added, if we have accrual rules set up to automatically put time into my bank on January 1 or the 1st of every month or whatever it might be, that time will show as being added, and in the reason text it'll say automatic allotment. If I earned comp time from an overtime, then that will show in here as well. Or if somebody had to manually go ahead and put time in, they'll be able to enter something in the reason text when they do, so we know why they were adding or subtracting that time. Next one is balance of time off. This will let me see all the different types of banks that were set up for my department, how much time I was given, how much time I've used this year, and what my current balance is. That's usually a good time to mention that in our system, balances are updated when time off entries are approved. So if I put in a request for December 1st off, once it's approved, it's going to show that time as used, and it's going to subtract it from my balance. That's in an attempt to try to help you make sure that you don't overdraw your balance there, overdraw your account, use too much time or more than you have. If something happens and you decide not to take December 1st off, and a supervisor goes in and removes, deletes that time off entry, that time will automatically be put back in your bank. So, it shows as used already, but we do have the ability to put it back in when that time off is removed. Next is overtime activity. This is going to be a list of any overtime entries that I have in the system for the current year. The overtime reason, the date, the number of hours, the status, the start time, and the end time. And then time off activity, very similar. This is going to show me any time off that I have in the system for the current year, the type of time off, the date, the shift, the number of hours, the status, start time, end time, and reason text. Okay. So those reports under the employee menu, they're very kind of basic, quick reports that just bring up the information for that employee for that year. Under the reports menu at the top here, the employee will be able to access those same reports. So I can access a time off activity report or an overtime activity report. But the difference is when I go to this here, I actually set the parameters. So I set the date range that I want. It defaults to this year, but maybe I want to look back at last year, or maybe I want to look at just a smaller date range. It also allows me to select employees. Now, as a user, this would most likely be set to only allow them to select their selves, since we don't want users running reports for other people. A supervisor could run something like this, though. And then I can filter by reason. So maybe I don't want to see all of my time off. Maybe I just want to see the sick time that I took, or sick and vacation, personal. And then maybe some additional filters. Maybe I want to filter by status. Maybe I only want to show what's been approved so far, or I just want to see what's still requested. After I set up those parameters, I hit search, and this will return this report for me. So I have the report portion with the employees group, their name, the reason for the time off, the status, the date, the shift, start time, end time, number of hours. We also have a graph over here, or a chart. It's a pie chart. I can also switch it to be a bar graph if I like. I can save that image, or I can minimize it using the arrows to put it off to the side. And another benefit here is if I bring up the report in this field, I can also save it as a PDF or as an Excel. Those reports under the employee menu, they're not really formatted to be printed out. So if I want to print the report out for some reason or save it, this is the best option for me, going under the reports menu and running these reports. Again, everything that you have under the employee menu will be here. You'll have the administrative days log, the overtime activity report, the balance of time off report, and the time off activity report. So all of those reports that you have under the employee menu can be run through here as well. Okay. One report that you will that we usually give users access to that they will not have in the employee menu, they'll only have it in the reports menu, is here, the employee statistical report. And this report contains a lot of information gathered into one place. So this one, again, has a date range. It's going to default to the current year, but you can adjust that if you need to. And you're going to see some information that we've seen in other reports, like your time balances, your time off activity, your overtime activity, and your administrative days log. But you'll also see some other information. There's work trends here. What days do I tend to work? What days do I tend to take off? What days do I tend to work overtime? There's a section for extra duty that will show any extra duty jobs that have been assigned to me, the date, the vendor, the description, the location, the start time, the end time, the number of hours, the rate that I was paid, and then the status, which would be either it hasn't been invoiced yet, or it's been invoiced, or it's been invoiced and paid. And then finally, time sellback. If your department does any type of time sellback, this area here would allow the employee to see what time was sold back and when. They'll see the type of time that was sold back, how much, the date it was processed on, and the user and the timestamp of who processed it and when. Okay, so that's the employee statistical report. It gives you a lot of information kind of all located in one spot. It's also the default homepage. If you do not choose a new homepage in the system, it will default to this whenever you log in to the web. Okay. So those are the reports that will be available on the web that usually most users are given access to. Does anybody have any questions on those reports, how to run them, what they show? Okay. All right, well, that covers all of our topics for our basic users today. I'll pause one more time for any questions on anything that we've covered today. Logging into the web page, changing your password, setting your home page, updating your personnel information, any of the schedule views, requesting time off, requesting overtime, requesting a switch, or any of the reports. Anybody have any questions, anything that you need a little more clarification on, anything you would like to see me go over a second time? Okay, well, if nobody else has any questions, then that'll conclude our session for today. Just a reminder to sign up for additional classes, including but not limited to VCSBT 9, which would be scheduling for supervisors. That's kind of the next class in the set of classes there. So be sure to sign up for that if you're interested in it or any of the other classes that we offer. Also, don't forget about our helpouts that are always available. Technical support helpouts are half an hour and are used for dealing with maybe some support questions that you might have. Training helpouts are usually 45 minutes, and any training issues or anything that you need to talk to a trainer about, setting something up or a little extra help on a certain topic, those are available for you as well. Please make use of those to answer any questions that you might have. Okay. Break one more minute for any last minute questions that might come up before I sign off. Okay. Well, I don't see anything else coming through, so I'll go ahead and close out the session. Thank you very much for your time today, and have a great day.